Hey guys, I'm the 50s Kid, and today I thought I would show you how to do some of the common things you need to do before starting any major repair on the BMW, depending on the repair. Well, first of all, how to jack up the car, and then secondly, how to remove the hood scoop or the air scoop, the air box, the fan and the fan shroud, the engine covers. Also, how to remove the DISA valve, how to remove the upper and lower intake boots if you need to, how to remove the heat shield, actually is what it's called, how to remove the microfilter housing and the microfilter. Things like that. Just all the things that, I mean, I've basically had to do these things 100 times at this point. You got to do them on almost every repair. So I just figured I would make one video to just show you how to do this stuff. That way I really didn't have to put it in every following video, and I can just link back to this one. So let's get started. Let's start with jacking up the car. You move your floor jack into position right underneath this spot. Normally on yours, there's going to be a little hump right there sticking down. This is actually, I think this is the spot that BMW intended for you to use as a jack point, but unfortunately, it's made out of aluminum and it tends to collapse. And, mine was already collapsed when I bought the car. I'm really not worried about it, and I don't think you should be either. This right here is the jacking point for your vehicle. This is where you support the vehicle when you're jacking it up or with a jack stand on either side. Just like that. If you don't have a large floor jack like that, you can always use a smaller 2-ton floor jack like this. Now, you're going to want to place your jack stand underneath there. You don't want to place it here. This is a plastic cover panel, so make sure that you press it, knock it. You can tell that it's plastic because it's bending inward. Here is hard metal, basically right here, and that's where you want to put your jack stand. And then you can lower the jack carefully, and your vehicle is supported. Do the same thing on the other side, and there you go. So the jacking point on the rear of the car is actually that bracket that goes underneath the differential, right there. To get the air scoop off, there are 3 plastic rivets. I'm actually missing 2 of them. I've only got 1. I like to use a pair of side cutting pliers or dikes. This just lets you kind of lightly grab onto the inner clip right there and pull it out. You come in here. To remove the fan and the fan shroud, I'm going to take my fan removal tools that I got off of eBay here. Use the water pump pulley holder. Grab onto just one of the bolts with the front of the wrench. Rest the wrench against the nut. Use the 32mm wrench to grab onto the nut. I'm just going to whack it to free it. That's all there is to the fan. Before I get the fan all the way off, I'm going to disconnect the aux sensor. There's just this little wiring harness that has 2 clips here and here. Mine's broke off on this side, but you just kind of unclip it and pull it out. And this side is actually held in. The wires is held into the side of the shroud right there. This kind of just pops out the front. With a 25mm or number 25 Torx, remove this screw right here. And there's a little plastic washer, as you can see. Careful, don't lose that. On the other side of the fan shroud, there's a little plastic rivet, just like on the air duct. And I'll remove it in the same way. Hopefully you can see it. Now we can spin the fan all the way off and pull out the fan and the shroud together. Now, you want to store your fan like this. Don't store it like this. You don't want to put pressure on one of the fan blades. Whatever you do, do not mess with this metal bar right here. It's actually calibrated for a certain it heats up with the air and it expands, and that's what makes the fan clutch engage and spin faster instead of just spinning idly. And you don't want to mess with the metal plate at all. If you tweak it in any way, it will break the fan, and the fan blades will come spinning off, and they'll they'll take out your radiator and cause you a world of hurt. So next I'm going to remove the air filter housing. Going to unscrew the clamp behind the MAF sensor here. I'm going to unclip the sensor, remove the two 10mm bolts. This wiring harness right here is actually connected to the air filter housing. It's connected on this hook right here. This little rubber piece is down over that hook, so unhook that. The whole thing comes out, you can set it aside. To remove the microfilter, they're just 3 90-degree clips like that. The cover pulls out, the microfilter comes out. Unscrew the 4 T30 Torx screws. Unclip the cover with your fingernails or a little pocket screwdriver. Just be careful not to break it. The battery cable's on the bottom, and the wiring loom for the coils is on the top. This just lifts out. To remove the engine covers, there are 2 bolts on each one, and there are these little covers on those bolts. And just use a little pocket screwdriver to get up underneath it and pry it off. They are 10mm bolts. And those are nuts. This one actually has these little clips that go underneath and hook under like this, so you got to pull it up from the left side. To get this off, you got to take off the oil cap. Be careful about the bolts that are in there, or the nuts. Take them out if you need to, or put the covers back on. For the upper intake boot, it's your choice whether or not to remove this plastic 90-degree elbow. You could break it if you're not too careful. If you don't really need to get this boot completely out of the way, you can just you can unscrew the hose clamp and just kind of move the boot off to the side somewhere. In my case, I just kind of like to remove everything and just get it out of my way, particularly because I'm filming. But I use some silicone spray on there, and that really makes it nice and easy. And if I can't get it out of there, see, you get the side cutters underneath it like that, and they just kind of helped to pry it up. Next, to get the hose clamp, I come in from the side, long screwdriver. There are 2 hose clamps there. You can unscrew either one, doesn't matter. And even though you got it loose and the clamp starts to move, get it a little looser. Now you can just remove that. And you can see why you could do either clamp. It doesn't matter, because this is just a connecting connector. To remove the upper heat shield, I actually like to disconnect this vacuum hose from the brake booster, because it's really not hard to get back in. You'll hear a little escape of gas there. Take this little thing off the top. This way you can pull this up and out of there. Careful not to lose this. Set it aside in a careful place, safe place. And you can kind of just twist this out of the way. You don't absolutely have to remove this. If your line is flexible enough, you actually have the space to twist this up like that, up out of the way, and you'll be able to pull the heat shield out. But sometimes these actually get a little brittle around this area right here, and they won't bend too easily. But I do find that it'll turn and twist slightly like that, depending on how tight it's clamped in to the sucking jet pump. And you can just kind of put it aside like that. And now you kind of have the room you need to get the heat shield out. These are just 90-degree turn clips that kind of just pop out of here. And you can very easily get the heat shield out of there. To remove the DISA valve, there are two T40 screws. One is down here. Unhook the electrical connector by pushing this in, pulling it down. The second screw is up here. Very carefully pull the DISA valve out by rocking it back and forth, twisting it a little. If you've never pulled yours out before, it's probably going to come out pretty easily, but you want to be careful, because if you've never had this out, there's a little metal pin on the end of it that could be loose, and it could fall down into the intake if you're not real careful. So be real careful like this. Pull it out and kind of angle it down so that this end goes up like that. That way if that metal pin's about to fall out, gravity will keep it in. Mine's actually a rebuilt unit. I've got a new O-ring on there. I had to scrape the old silicone O-ring that was kind of molded in there. I had to scrape that out and put a new O-ring in. New flapper valve, which is actually made out of aluminum. And instead of a pin going in this way, there's a bolt that goes all the way through this way. And that way there's nothing that's ever going to fall out anymore. So to remove the lower intake boot, you can see that this line is kind of clipped in down here to that little clip. I'm going to unclip it. And the sucking air jet pump right here is actually hooked into a clip as well. And you can just pull it out of that clip and just get yourself some more room. Just put this up out of the way. And what we want to do is we want to loosen the clamp on this upper boot right here that's connected to the idle air control valve. And there's going to be another clamp underneath it after that. Hopefully yours are oriented in an easy to get at way. Sometimes these are like underneath here, which is really going to be a pain in the ass. You'll need like a little stubby screwdriver in that case, or actually you can buy like a flexible nut driver, a nut removal tool that's just got like an 8mm socket on the end of it, and it's flexible, so those are really nice. I don't have one of those. I'm going to loosen that really well, particularly well, and then tilt it down out of the way. And here you go, you can see that that other clamp right there. It's going to fall, so I'm going to reach down and hold it. Now that I've got it loose, I find it easier to pull the bottom one off. And be careful with the top one, because this is a notorious weak spot right here. So I just kind of like to get it loose, and sometimes you'll find that it's more difficult than others. There. To get the air conditioning belt off, you need a breaker bar and a 16mm socket or a ratchet. You gotta hook on to a bolt right down there. Twist this way, counterclockwise, to relieve the pressure, the tension on the pulley, and let up, and that's it. Usually there's writing, and if you can find the writing, just note whether or not you're able to read the writing from this angle, or you're not able to. See, but I can tell that it's upside down, so I'll remember to put it on upside down. For the main belt, again, 16mm socket with a breaker bar. The nut is right there. And you're just going to relieve the tension on the pulley by turning counterclockwise. Pull the belt off the pulley, like that. You can let up tension. Now you can just fish the pulley off, the belt off the pulleys, I should say. Once again, noting the orientation of the writing. And I can see that my writing is upside down, so I'll put it back on the same way. I'm going to check the condition of your belts. You want to bend them back this way. Make sure that there's no cracks in them. Make sure they're still nice and flexible. Put the belt back on here. I'm going to put it over the pulleys. In the general spot again, I've got my writing reversed because that's how it was when I took it off. Slip it underneath these pulleys now. This is how you have to do it. Here, when you're slipping it around these pulleys, it's going to go underneath the top pulley right there. And this little bit's going to come up and go over the bottom pulley. I'm going to come in down here and slip my breaker bar with this socket, 16mm socket, over there. I'm going to take up tension, slip the belt underneath that top pulley, slip the belt over and around the bottom pulley here. Make sure that the belt is in the grooves on all of the pulleys and let up tension, just like that. So to put the air conditioning belt back on, I've already got my breaker bar on there, and twist it aside. I'm going to put my belt down on there. I've got it oriented in the way it was when I took it off. I can't read the writing. Looks like the writing is upside down from this angle. And I'm just going to slip the belt over the pulleys so that it's in the grooves. And that's it. So I'm going to put back the lower intake boot. And you can kind of see how it should be oriented because the top of it's there, the bottom's there. I'll slip the top on the intake air control valve and slip the bottom of the boot in on, and you'll feel there was a tab on the bottom of the boot, and that tab goes between two sort of indents on the bottom of the throttle, and I'm just feeling with my hand kind of where it is. Make sure you get the boot all the way down and all the way on so that you don't see any of that shiny metal that it's covering up. I'm twisting this top clamp out of the way at first so that I can get at the bottom clamp, and I'm going to put that bottom clamp just right in the sweet spot. Where I can just get my screwdriver right on it, tighten it up. That way it's in a nice spot next time I come back and need to get it off. And I'm going to rotate this clamp so that it's also in that same spot right there. So I'm going to take that the sucking jet pump, and I'm going to snap it back into the bracket that it was in, just like that. And this lower tube, snap that back in where it was. There's a little clip down here. Inspect these hoses. Make sure they're not broken. These are just simple vacuum lines. You can get new ones at your local auto parts store. In fact, I really need to replace this top one. I've been meaning to. I'm going to put the DISA valve back in now. I've actually got a little bit of silicone like dielectric grease rubbed around the O-ring right there, and put that in, and it's actually going to be a really tight fit to get that O-ring in there. To do it, you just kind of twist it back and forth as you work it down on. Make sure you don't pinch that O-ring. I think the grease is very, very important. Believe me, I've actually pinched and torn an O-ring and had to buy a new one. Make sure it's absolutely all the way on and you cannot see the O-ring when you look down in. Careful with these bolts. These are the only number 40 Torx bolts I've seen on this engine, actually. If you drop one down and it falls into the aluminum skid plate, yeah, you'll never see it again unless you take that skid plate off. To slip the heat shield back in, I'm just gonna bend this line back up and out of the way, like it was. And slip it down in. Just one thing to note, you've got these 3 tabs that are gonna hook over the edge of the body right down here. Make sure this is not in the way. This little rubber grommet actually goes in like that. Make sure it's in the right way. The wiring harness goes up there. You remember to put this in a safe place, I'm sure. So, slip this back on is really easy. You just, again, the grommet stayed in the vacuum pump, and that way we just pop it right back in. Remember to put the trim back, little rubber trim. Don't forget to hook the DISA electrical connection back up. I had moved it out of the way, just like that. You'll find that all the electrical connections on the car, basically the wires are only long enough to go to wherever they're supposed to be hooked up. They're not really longer than that. So that gives you a clue as to what goes where. And also every electrical connector is keyed, so you can't put the wrong connector in the wrong place. So with those two factors, you should be able to figure out what connector goes to where. Okay, let's put the upper intake boot back on. Put the boot back on. You notice that front clap came off. Let's not lose that. Okay, we got it in. And I'm going to turn the clamp so I can access it through here, just like before. And I'm holding it in place so it doesn't wander off on me. This one doesn't need to be super tight. There's really no pressure on this at all. It's not gonna pop out. Don't forget to reconnect the elbow. I'm gonna put the air box back in now. It just slides down in. And I'm gonna make sure that I grab the electrical connector for the MAF sensor. Just got it up in my hand. Before I slip this down in, it's just easier that way. You see that I've got the clamp on the intake boot, and I'll reconnect that right there. Put the two 10mm bolts back on. And again, that electrical harness that had that little rubber boot on it, I'm slipping over the hook on the back of the air cleaner box. Let's put the engine covers back on. Take off the cap. This one goes on first. Once again, this one hooks underneath like that. Cap's back on. This one's actually broken. So the filter housing just slips back down in there. Notice I'm being real gentle when I use my impact ratchet to put things back on. Not pulling the trigger all the way. The battery goes on the bottom, battery cable, and the coil cable goes on the top. This just slips back on, snaps in. Put the filter back in. The filter has these little tabs on the bottom of it. Those go down because they're little indents on either side. Housing slips back in, or the cover, I should say. Again, 90-degree turns. So the fan and the fan housing go back in together. Can't get one in without the other, or after the other, I should say. And it can be tricky to thread back on. Remember, you're going in reverse. Now we'll put the air scoop back in.
put my only pop rivet back in place.
So that's going to do it for this video. The only word of caution really is when you're putting the DISA valve back in, just make sure there's a little bit of grease around that O-ring so that you don't tear it. And thanks for watching.